next question is the most commonly asked, the most frequently asked. Anytime I do a Q&A, I get asked this like 20 times. It was a really, really terrifying time in general, and I'm kind of like getting emotional now just like thinking about that point in my life. Like, I'm okay with being a hypersensitive adoptive mom. I'm okay with that. Welcome back to the channel. If it's your first time here, welcome. I'm Lorient, and this is my little space on the interwebs where I talk about pretty much anything I feel like talking about. Today, I'm actually going to be doing, I don't even know what I'm calling this video yet. I guess you'll know because it'll be in the title, but I'm thinking like a mini adoption Q&A video. Normally when I do Q&As, I go over to my Instagram @LorientTull and I solicit questions from you guys for an upcoming Q&A, and I get lots of questions from you guys. This time I didn't do that. Actually, I took some of my most asked questions, and a couple months ago I had asked you guys over on Instagram what kind of adoption content you wanted to see, and a bunch of you submitted some really great ideas or questions, but I didn't necessarily think that they could be their own standalone videos. So I decided to kind of compile them into like my next Q&A, which is gonna be this video right here. I've been holding on to these for a little while too, just like waiting for the right time. And right now it's November, which is National Adoption Month. So I kind of figured like what better time than to talk about these things. Oh, and I feel like I should give anybody who's new here like a tiny bit of context. I'm a mother by way of domestic infant adoption. I have a 2.5-year-old son and I have a 1-year-old daughter. They are biological siblings, and we adopted my son in 2020, and then our daughter was born in 2021 and her adoption was finalized in 2022. Our family was built on adoption. We love adoption, but we do realize that it is an incredibly complex thing and that it is both. That there's room for, you know, happiness and sorrow and positive and negative feelings within adoption. Not every adoptee's experiences are the same, and not every adoptee shares the same feelings about their adoption. And that's okay. As an adoptive parent, I kind of believe that our job as adoptive parents in the triad to just listen and support adoptees with whatever feelings they may be working through over their own adoption. Adoption is very near and dear to my heart, and so I talk about it quite a bit on this channel. Right now that we're all caught up, we're gonna get into the questions in no particular order. I'm just gonna run through them. The first question is, how do you plan to talk to your kids about their adoptions? So we've already started talking to our kids about their adoptions. Like I said before, they're 2.5 and 1. So what they can understand of their adoptions is obviously very minimal. But from the time that Josiah was a baby, I would tell him his adoption story as his bedtime story. And I would use everybody's names, and I would go through how, you know, mommy and daddy's journey to him was and what it was like when we met him. And then, you know, we kind of just walk through his personal story, and then we tell Ariella her own story as well. And I think when you adopt your children and they're a very young age, that's a great way to start introducing their story to them, is by telling it as a literal story. Obviously that conversation has to change as your children get older and they can understand more, and you have to make sure that whatever you're sharing is age appropriate. But right now with Josiah, who is 2.5 and speaking and kind of understands a little bit more and can verbalize a little bit more, I will oftentimes tell him, you know, that he grew in his other mommy's tummy and that she picked, you know, mommy and daddy to be his parents. And you know, now here we are, we're a family and they're part of our family. And we talked to him about his birth family, different members of his birth family, and he's met his birth family before. Obviously, I don't think he was able to really take in who everybody actually was in relation to him. The more you do that, the more you introduce adoption into your day-to-day life and their stories and the bits and pieces of how your family came to be, into those like day-to-day, just like little talks, the less it becomes like this big conversation that needs to be had, and the more it becomes just like part of our life kind of thing. At least that's how I view it. The next one is, how was your second adoption different from your first? Our second adoption was different from our first, mainly in just like the way that it came about. So with our first adoption, we were seeking out an adoption. We researched agencies, we figured out what kind of adoption we wanted to do. We found an agency that we liked and we wanted to work with. We did our home study paperwork, we did our interviews, we were approved, we put together a profile, we were awaiting family, and then we went through the rest of our journey where we had been matched. We had a failed match, and then we were matched again, and we ended up with a disrupted placement with twins. And then 3 weeks after that, we were matched with Josiah and his birth family, and we ended up being placed with him, and then we adopted him, I think 8 months later. His adoption was finalized. And so that's kind of like a typical adoption story when, you know, a family is seeking out an adoption. With Ariella, it was different because we found out right after we celebrated Josiah's first birthday, which we did a couple months after his birthday because of COVID. And we found out that his birth parents were expecting, and they asked us if we would raise their daughter along with Josiah. And we said, of course, instantly. We knew we wanted to grow our family anyway. It was a little bit sooner than I think we had ever thought we would be able to, but it was still such a blessing. And so we were like, yeah, absolutely. Then the rush was on to update our home study and do all of the other things. So in that situation, the match came before all of like the logistics, whereas with Josiah, it was like logistics first, all of the formalities, and then came the match. Whereas with Ariella's, it was like match, and then we had to kind of work backwards. After your adoptions, did you deal with the post-adoption blues? I didn't know that the post-adoption blues were a thing until Josiah was probably about 10, 11 months old, and I read something about it on Instagram, and I went and I like looked it up, and I was like, oh, okay, like this is a thing. I did have a period after we adopted Josiah where I felt very much like I was in a rut. I think there was more to it than just like post-adoption blues. My son was born like 4 or 5 days before our entire like state went into lockdown for the pandemic. All of a sudden, I was this new mom with this new baby navigating this, and I had no help from family. I had nobody could even come over. There was just nobody. I was scared to go to the grocery store because I was scared that I was gonna come home and bring something home to him. My husband was an essential worker, and he had to go to work every single day and be around people. And he tried to be as safe as he could, but I was terrified that he was gonna bring something home and give it to the baby or get me sick. And if I was really sick with COVID, how would I take care of the baby? It was a really, really terrifying time in general, and I'm kind of like getting emotional now just like thinking about that point in my life, like what should have been the absolute happiest time of my life, and in many ways it was also the most terrifying time in my life. I had never been more scared because here I was responsible for this new life, and I was so unsure of like what was going on outside of the walls of my house. So I quietly went through quite a bit in that period of my life. And you know, then when I went back to work, I wasn't back to work, so to speak. I was working from home. So it was a whole lot of adjustment. It's just a really crazy time period where like I didn't feel good about myself because I, one, barely had time to shower, but like also wasn't going anywhere ever, wasn't seeing anybody ever. So it almost felt pointless to like waste time, effort, or product doing like my hair and makeup. And so I started to feel really gross, and I always smelled like spoiled milk because he would spit up on me all the time. And I was constantly like just feeding him and changing him. I was by myself all day. Like I kind of just felt like a blob, and I had to pull myself out of it. And I don't know if I can credit that whole period to like post-adoption blues, but I do know that I hated the way that felt so much that when we were expecting Ariella's arrival, I really sat down and was like, okay, what do I need for me to not go back to that place? What am I gonna need? I'm gonna need support. I'm gonna need to be very open and transparent, because the first time I went through it very much by myself, because I felt like if I said anything to anybody, my husband, my mom, anybody, that it would come off like I was ungrateful for like this incredible blessing that I had been praying for years. And I never wanted it to seem that way, so I just like stayed very quiet. But I was like, I need to talk about it because getting it out there, I think, will help me feel better. I need to schedule dates for myself, and I really worked on that when Ariella came, and it definitely helped. So if you're somebody who is approaching that stage of life, or you're in that stage of life, try to think about the things that you need to take care of yourself. And I mean, maybe you don't have the opportunity to get out for an hour and just, you know, go get your nails done, or just go take a walk in the park by yourself. But little things that bring you joy throughout the day, that make you feel like you, those are important. And I think those will help you kind of get over that hump, because it is hard. It's an adjustment. Whenever you have a new baby or a new child in your life, it's a huge adjustment. Next question is the most commonly asked, the most frequently asked. Anytime I do a Q&A, I get asked this like 20 times. I kid you not. Will you adopt again? I would love to adopt again. And I know that Mike would too. We've talked about it before. We often go back and forth between whether or not we want to try to conceive and carry baby number 3 or whether we want to adopt baby number 3. I think initially we thought we knew which way we wanted to go, but now we're not as sure. And, you know, I don't think we want to make any decisions, especially because these are expensive decisions. These are life-changing decisions. These are decisions that not only affect my husband and I, but they also affect our children. And so there are things that we really, really need to think through, work through, talk through, all of the things. And so I'm not sure. Would we love to adopt again? Absolutely. We would love to adopt again. Is that in the cards for us? I'm not sure. I hope so. I hope, but again, I don't know. Be transparent and honest with you guys. You know, I do have some fears surrounding adopting again. Fear that we'll face a lot of rejection just because, you know, we are a family that already has 2 children. And so I feel like it's going to be harder to find an expectant mom who can really see her child in our family. And you know, I don't know, it's probably an irrational fear. Maybe, I don't really know how rational it is. It's just a fear that I have. And we all know, like, sometimes our anxieties and our fears literally are for nothing, but that's just a thought that I have. And it's not that we're in any kind of rush to grow our family. But I just feel like, you know, if we're being presented constantly and we're constantly getting no'd or turned down, after a while that does start to like weigh on you, right? Another fear that I have surrounding adopting again would just be that we have such a good relationship with our children's birth family. We speak with them often. We're always open to seeing them. We love them so very much. And that's exactly what I would want if we adopted again and this 3rd child had a different birth family. We would want that same kind of relationship, but obviously I can only foster the relationship so much on my part, and it has to be received. And as much as I know I would always do what I had to do to keep that relationship really positive and moving forward, you know, you never know what the other person wants or the position the other person's going to be in their life. And so I just worry that if we have a really good relationship over here with these children's birth family, we have another child, we have a different relationship with their birth family, it could create tension amongst the kids in the house or just feelings of like, why can't I have that? And I don't know, that just makes me very, very nervous as an adoptive mom because I want all my kids to have the same thing and the same love from all parties involved. And it's just a fear of mine that it might just not be the same. This is also kind of in a similar vein of like being rejected, but another fear I have is like, obviously, if you've been around for a while, you know about our adoption journey to Josiah. It wasn't an easy one. I kind of gave a Cliff Note summary of it before where we had a failed match and then we had a disrupted placement with twins. And that one was really rough. We had a situation where money was trying to be taken from us. Like, it was really, really hard. It was a hard financial journey. It was a hard emotional journey. At one point in that whole thing, like, we almost had to walk away because we were like, I don't know that we can afford to lose any more money in this. I don't know if we could afford to have our hearts broken one more time in this. I know that signing up for another adoption journey could very well bring all of those things back into our lives. I'm at a place now where I am responsible for 2 children. We're responsible for our kids, and the thought of losing money, even $2,000, like, that's a lot of money. Like, losing money in a situation, I just think to myself, like, damn, that could have been, you know, college money for our kids. That could have been birthday party money. That could have been a family vacation to make memories somewhere. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around, and you just never know what you're getting yourself into. As much as we would love to do it again, it's just we have to figure it out. We have to figure out what we want to do for our family and what makes the most sense for not only us, but also like our kids that we're responsible for now. Because as much as we'd love to have another child, you know, we've already signed up for the responsibility of being the parents to these kids, and we owe them everything. Would you ever consider embryo adoption? Yes. we would. Mike and I have talked about this plenty of times actually, that we would be totally open to embryo adoption. If we went down the route of like infertility testing and doing all that stuff to see if we could conceive and carry, and the test results came back and the doctor was like, hey, listen, your egg and your sperm, it's just not gonna work. We would totally be open to the possibility of adopting an embryo and then carrying that embryo. Would you ever foster to adopt? At this point in my life, I'm very much somebody who likes to say like never say never, because you really never know what you're gonna end up doing in your life. Like it's full of possibilities, and you could go down so many different roads that lead you to different things that you may never have thought you would ever encounter in your life. Not saying that I never think that we'll do that, but I think at this point in our lives where our children are so young and we're in the season of family growth, I just don't think it's right for us right now. But that's not to say that when our children are older and we're a little bit older and seasoned in our parenthood, that we wouldn't be open to being a foster family and taking kids in and loving them and giving them a safe, warm, loving home for as long as that's supposed to be, whether that's for a few months, a few years, or forever. But right now, I just don't see that as something that we would be looking into. But again, I never say never, and I never know what the future is gonna hold. What are your views on closed versus open adoptions? Whew. Follow me over on Instagram and you've seen it. I've made a couple of pieces, reels, posts, things like that are very pro open adoption. I even made a video on here about like facilitating kind of a healthy open relationship with your child's birth parents. I am very pro open adoption. It was something that when we started our first adoption journey scared the absolute heck out of me. I knew we wanted to do it, but I was still terrified about what that could look like and what that would be like. It's really interesting because the first time we met an expectant mom who had picked us in our very first match, and we spoke with her, we got to get to know her a little bit, I instantly was like, yeah, this is actually easy. Like, this makes sense. This relationship should continue and forever, and you should be at birthdays, and we should be having phone calls, and I want you to see this baby grow up. And it just like all of a sudden made so much sense to me. And the more I educated myself on the stories and experiences of adoptees and birth parents, the more I was just like, yeah, this is the only thing that makes sense to me, really. Now, you have to understand there are varied degrees of open adoptions, but I am very pro open adoption, and specifically pro direct contact between adoptive parents and their child's biological parents. And I understand that in certain situations, they're not always able to have that. Maybe it's not safe for them to have that, depending on what the situation is. And I get that. And in those situations, I would say those are the exceptions. I would say they're not the rules. How do you handle people who are not supportive of your adoption journey? For the most part, everybody was supportive of our adoption journey while we were pursuing it. In the beginning though, when we first brought up that this is something that we were looking into, we did have some family members that were a little bit concerned. They didn't really know a lot about adoption. What they did know was stuff that they had heard on the news, which, you know, when you hear things on the news, you're tending to hear like the shock value stories, right? If it's on Dr. Phil, it's supposed to be entertaining. It's not like your average normal adoption story. But those are the things that people have heard. Lifetime movies, the news clips that hit the evening news, the Dr. Phil episodes, like the daytime TV shock value, you know, type things. So obviously that's gonna scare a lot of people. A lot of the times I feel like those kinds of fears come with just, you know, the lack of education on the subject. And so I think it just took a little bit of educating and a little bit of them just seeing the process and seeing how things work before they were like, oh, okay, like we get it. And they seem like this is really what they want. They're very happy. Like this is what they're gonna do. And once that kind of was all figured out, everybody was totally fine. I would say approach it with patience at first. Provide them some education, provide them some knowledge, kind of walk them through what the process is like, reassure them that this is really what you want, and go from there. If that mindset continues, if those negative comments continue when you're on your adoption journey or when you've been placed with your child, that's a different conversation. And at that point, I think you have to do whatever you need to do to not only protect your peace, but protect your child. If that's the case, then that's something you have to work through on your own. But I would say approach it with patience, love, and understanding in the beginning. Provide the education, and then take it from there. Do you think you're very sensitive towards things regarding your children because they are adopted? I'm an adoptive mom and I think that I am. 100%, totally, absolutely. Both myself and my husband, I would say. General, right? Parents ride for their kids. You see your kid getting bullied, like you want to step in and you want to protect your kid. Except when we're talking about adoption, we might not be talking about a playground bully. We might be talking about your Aunt Sally that you only see twice a year, but every time she comes, she makes some kind of offhand remark about your real kids versus your adopted kids. We know how we view our kids, right? We know how we love our kids. Our kids are our own kids, and they are literally our everything. But we also know that not everybody views our situation the same way. And so we're very sensitive to things that people may say. Most of the time, there is no malicious intent behind it. We don't actually have an Aunt Sally that says your real kids versus your adopted kids, because if we did, they wouldn't be around. But we're hypersensitive. We've done a lot of work, like I said, to educate ourselves on the stories of adoptees and how, you know, their own adopted families made them feel at times and how maybe they didn't always feel like they fit in. And I listen to those stories and I really take that in and think about that. Everything that I do, every decision that I make, I truly think about how that could affect my children and their mental health and state of mind regarding their adoptions when they get older. Everything I do. I kid you not. Sometimes it's exhausting to the level in which I consider how something could affect them. Yeah, we're hypersensitive to things that people may say or do in regards to our children. Maybe people would even argue that we're more sensitive than we should be, but it's probably never anything that we're going to like turn off. If we don't advocate for our kids, if we don't make sure that people are respecting them, their adoption stories, their boundaries, you know, and loving them the way that we love them, then who's gonna do that for them? I'm okay with being a hypersensitive adoptive mom. I'm okay with that. That's my lot in life. I will take it. It's okay. But that is all the questions I have for today's mini Q&A. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you could leave it a thumbs up. You can leave me any questions or comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos in the future, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.